In September 2018, Honda revealed the brand new 5th generation CR-V. But following the fallout over a certain fuel type, Honda has taken diesel completely off the menu, and instead we have this, the first ever hybrid version of the Honda CR-V.
In a nutshell, compared with the regular petrol version, the hybrid should net you better fuel economy and, thanks to its nifty hybrid setup, quieter running and nippy road manners. The flip side is that you lose a bit of boot space in order to accommodate the car's hybrid battery, and there's no 7-seat option either, like there is with the regular petrol version. There's only one engine and transmission option, which I'll talk about later, but you will have to choose between front and all-wheel drive, and it's a decision that you really don't want to get wrong. It's a little bit more expensive than the regular petrol version, but spec for spec, the price gap can be as little as £800.
So let's start with the interior. I mean, it doesn't exactly scream premium, but it is modern, it is swish, and I think it's quite neat. I quite like these wooden panels up front. They add a nice sort of dash of colour, and there's lots of like cubby holes and cup holders and a decent space here where you can store everything, making it quite practical. Now, it's super easy to get into this car thanks to the high seats and the wide opening doors. There's also the grab handles in case you need a bit more assistance. But just look at this, look how much space I have around my knees, my feet, my head, and this is with the optional sunroof installed, which actually takes away some of the headspace. So this is a massive amount of room back here. Now typically whoever drew the short straw has to sit in the middle rear seat, which as with many cars is a little bit narrower, a little bit tougher. But what makes this straw so short is that while most of this backrest is nice and squishy and supportive, there's this plastic bit right in the corner and it just digs into your lower back, and that's going to make any long journey more uncomfortable than it has to be.
A couple of handy touches we really like include the pair of USB sockets in the back. It's handy for any kids or other passengers who want to keep their phones and tablets charged up on the go. Then there's this 2-in-1 sunglasses holder and curved mirror for keeping an eye on the kids in the back. Personally, I've not seen the two mixed together before and think it's a great idea. The average boot space in a large SUV is around 430 litres up to the window, but even with the 60 or so litres you lose thanks to the battery being under the boot floor, Honda says there is still 500 litres of space, making for a massive and useful boot. The rear seats can be dropped with a flick of a lever, expanding the total loading capacity to a massive 1700 litres.
Now this car has an interesting setup, something called Intelligent Multi-Mode Drive Technology. That combines 2 electric motors, a 2-litre petrol engine and a fixed gear transmission.
In hybrid mode, the petrol engine doesn't actually supply power directly to the wheels like other hybrids do. Instead, the engine drives an electric generator, which in turn powers both the hybrid's battery and another electric motor, which in turn feeds the wheels.
But does it work? Well, honestly, I think so, yes. This car feels nippy, it feels responsive, it feels light. I like the way everything works together, especially at low speeds where you're typically using either hybrid or electric-only modes. This makes the car not only quick and responsive, but silent when you're moving about, and that's brilliant. Now, this car doesn't struggle when you get to motorway speeds, but accelerate up to faster speeds like I'm doing now, and I'm doing so up a hill, you will find the car gets a little bit louder and you're going to get the petrol engine kicking in. But as soon as you ease off the accelerator, that noise is going to fall away again. Now, because of the electric motors, you will always sort of hear a tiny little sort of electric hum in the background. It's just one of those things that's almost on the edge of your hearing. And to be honest, as soon as you put on the radio, then you're not going to notice it.
Honda claims that the move between hybrid mode, electric mode, and the admittedly rare petrol-only mode should be seamless, and they're absolutely right. While you will notice the sound of the petrol engine kicking in under heavy acceleration, in both the all-wheel drive and the front-wheel drive versions of the car, there's no judder or loss of power as the car slips between these 3 different drive modes. The unusual hybrid system feels accomplished and makes for an impressive car to drive. Well, that's true at least when you're driving the all-wheel drive version. If you, however, opt for the front-wheel drive car, despite it having the same engine, I found it to be noticeably louder and a bit less capable as it laboured to keep up with the demand I was putting on it. It did not feel anywhere near as refined as the all-wheel drive version, and we recommend you go for the latter.
So this is a fixed gear transmission, so I don't have gears to choose from, but you might notice I've still got flappy paddles. They don't control any gears, instead they control the amount of regenerative braking force that is applied to the car. Now, regen braking, for anybody who's never driven a hybrid or an electric car before, means when I take my foot off the accelerator or when I press the brake, the power is actually collected back again by the battery.
You can use the paddles to increase this effect, and the car will slow quicker as soon as you take your foot off the accelerator. However, unless you're in sports mode, the adjustment is only temporary and tends to cancel out quite quickly, which really limits the appeal of being able to adjust it in the first place.
Visibility wise, I'm sat higher up than it would be in a normal car. I've got a good view of the road ahead. These pillars are quite thick, they always tend to be in modern cars, especially the ones at the rear. That can make it quite difficult when you're doing, say, a 3-point turn. But generally, I've been in cars with much worse visibility than this. To be fair, the rear window is pretty big and I've got a good view of what's behind me. Also, these wing mirrors, I'm pretty sure they are bigger than average, and I've got a really good view at the side of the car, which is helpful for manoeuvring and when you're overtaking another car, say, on the motorway.
A negative of the CR-V, and as a standard issue among Honda cars at the time of filming, is the infotainment system. It feels clunky, outdated, and lacks an intuitive interface. However, there is a saving grace. Android Auto and Apple CarPlay come as standard across the range. That means if you plug in a compatible smartphone via a USB, an Android or Apple interface will take over the center screen, and you can start using in-car versions of popular apps to control navigation, music, and more.
I've also got to say this car handles well, particularly for its size. The steering has a little bit of weight to it, which is nice. I mean, you don't get a huge amount of feedback from the road, but to be honest, I wasn't expecting it in a car like this anyway. The suspension seems fairly well set up in that this car is nice and comfortable. When you go around a corner, you do get a bit of body lean, and there's no getting around that. This is a big car, but it's not like you find the car wallowing around corners. If you really push this car on sort of twisty country roads, you are going to get the car lurching a little bit, but to be fair, this is a big SUV. It's not the kind of car that you're going to do such things in. What this car is set up for is cruising. It's an easy car to drive, it's a relaxing car to drive, and it's just one of those vehicles that soaks up the miles.
A key selling point of any hybrid is its fuel economy and emission figures, but sadly we won't truly know either until we get this car into our lab at a later point. But on paper at least, the CR-V hybrid is about 10 mpg better than its petrol counterpart, coming in at 51.4 mpg for the all-wheel drive version and 53.3 mpg for the two-wheel drive version in official tests. The average fuel economy for SUVs of this size is around 45, and that includes diesel. So if the CR-V can get 50 mpg or close in our tests, it will be a real win for this Honda hybrid.
So is this a good car? Well, I certainly think so. I mean, what I love about this hybrid is that it doesn't feel like a compromise over the petrol version of the car, which I've also driven and I also liked. But the hybrid version, especially with the all-wheel drive setup, it just feels that a little bit nippier, a little bit quieter. And that means you're not just buying a hybrid for the better fuel economy figures, but because it's a better car to drive generally. Now, I know with a hybrid you do lose a little bit of boot space and you don't have a 7-seat option like you do in the regular petrol car, but if you can live with having 5 seats in your car and you want a good, practical SUV, then I think the hybrid version of the Honda CR-V should be on your shortlist. For the full written reviews of both the Honda CR-V hybrid and the regular Honda CR-V, head to which.co.uk/cars.